but by far the most profound. You were shown the entire plan of salvation from the council in heaven through the war in heaven and clear through till the cleansing of the earth. Is that correct?
At least glimpses of each of those phases. Yes. So I don't know that I was shown every little detail of everything, but shown quite a bit, yes.
And that's one of the things that makes this profound. You also saw the life of most, if not all, of the prophets.
Yes.
And the birth and the mission of the Savior, his death and his resurrection. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And this makes you a witness to these things. And there are a lot of things that you were silent about for, 9 years?
Over 9 years. It was silent as far as being able to publicly speak about it and even really go into any detail with just acquaintances and even friends. I was able to share right away with my husband. While I was still in the hospital right after it happened, I started to tell my husband about that, and select individuals that were brought into my life, a few close friends, my parents, and a few other family members that are close to me and that I basically felt would keep it in confidence. But I was not really even given permission by the Lord to go into a lot of detail other than with my husband. And even some of those details, it was a timing thing. And the Lord's timing is not our own. It's always perfect, but it's not our own. So,
well, and that's an important aspect. Some people off the air have asked me questions that, of course, I couldn't answer, but I promised that I would ask you in some instances.
Okay.
And one of them was, well, why were you instructed to remain silent for that period of time?
Well, now I'll just clarify. I wasn't instructed to remain totally silent to everyone, but I was instructed to remain silent about majority of what I'd been shown. And I was instructed to remain silent still about many things that just pertain to knowledge for me and my family, or just for me, for my learning and growth. But then there are specific things that I was shown that, for lack of a better word, are part of my mission. We each have a foreordained mission in this life. And part of it that was made known to me was that I agreed to this in the councils of heaven, that it would be part of my mortal experience, that I would serve as a witness and to testify of many things, but first and foremost of God's love and of his plan of salvation for us. And what that entails is a grand expanse of many things. But in short, it includes the love the Lord has for us, and also that we each have an important role. We have agency. We had agency in the preexistence. We continue to have agency, and it's an eternal principle that we will always have agency. And yet the Lord knows us from the beginning, and he knows all, and he knows us so well that he has a beautiful grand plan, individual plan for each of us, but then a grand plan for the whole human family. And with that, he's able to orchestrate and help utilize the talents and gifts that we have. And so on the timing of things, I'll give the very simple answer, because there are some things that were made known to me that are, again, just for me. But what I can share is that pertain to some specific things that are in the message of what I witness and what I am to testify of have to do with the coming days, as prophesied for thousands of years in the Bible, as well as in other books of Scripture, including the Book of Mormon, in reference to the last days which we're living in, and even the very final hours prior to the Savior's return and the second coming. And so timing is not the same in the spirit world, but what was essentially explained to me was on some, I don't necessarily like to use the word conditions, but that's the human word for it. That's not the word that was used in the spirit world, but in the English language, the closest word I can think of is the covenants I made and the promises I made we kind of came to an agreement that I would be shown these things, and my part of that is that upon agreeing to that, I promised that I would heed the counsel of the Lord and of those that knew more than I do, and in that I was instructed that I needed to discern very carefully who I shared what with, when, and how. And so there are things that I've been able to share, for instance, with my husband, but no one else. There are things that I've been able to share, some with my children, and some things that they're not yet old enough to understand or that would not be for their benefit. And some things that I could share with maybe some of my siblings or my husband's family and some of my close friends that are trusted confidence, but also would be of support and strength to me to be able to carry what is quite honestly has weighed very heavily on me. There at times have been, it has felt like a great weight and a burden, wanting to share a message, because as time has gone on, it'll now be 10 years, September 28th. But as time has gone on, and I've recognized more and more things that have come to fruition of things that I was shown that would occur, as we draw closer, it's a very surreal experience. I have no words for it other than to say that as time has gone on, although it's been longer, it'll be, again, close to 10 years, I actually have more clarity today on those things than I did even initially when I awoke from my experience.
Well, you shared off the air the fact that some of these scenes have been repeated since that time for clarity. Is that correct?
Yes. And the other thing is the Lord in His tender mercies has given me a lot of practice. And what I mean by that is that as I have sought to have faith and trust in Him and try to understand and discern what it is I was shown and what I'm to do with that, He kind of, I don't know that He'd call it this. This is how, again, in our English language here on earth, be like I've been given dreams and impressions and other experiences that have served as reminders of some of the things that I was shown. Not on everything, but on some of those critical issues and key events that would occur. The things that stand out are details of many of the stories that are in the scriptures that then came alive for me. I have had, I've read just a few reviews, not a lot, but I've had some of the individuals who have critiqued the book that have made comments along the lines of they wish that they didn't think it was very personal, that there wasn't a whole lot there on the personal level, and actually that was something I was instructed not to do, is not to put a lot of my personality into the book. And so I actually am grateful for those people that have brought that to my attention. It kind of, maybe in a weird way, brings me a sense of peace that this experience, while this was my experience, this is not about my near-death experience. This is about me serving as a witness and as a testifier of eternal truths that were planned from the beginning, and me just doing my little part to help build the kingdom and prepare us for the days ahead.
Now, that's an important issue, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, it seems to me as though more and more people are having these NDEs all over the world, not just here, not just part of the American culture, but everywhere.
Yes. Now, I haven't read very many of them. In fact, that was another area I was instructed on, is that I was given specific counsel about a lot of things. One was how to deal with many of the things and the trials that would come to pass prior to and then even after having shared my story. And one of the things that I was specifically counseled not to do was to not research, not read, not get on the internet or anywhere else and read other people's experiences, that I needed to have my story written and shared authentically and as my own, and not convoluted by somebody else's experience. And so mine is a very simple, straightforward book. It's purposefully written in the manner it's written so that it can be hopefully easily read to even some of the younger generation, to members of all denominations. And the Lord loves all of his children equally. So this is not, although I am of the LDS faith, this is not a book written just to LDS members of the church. This is written to all of God's children, in part to help hasten his work, and also to spread a message of love and light and hope, and also as a voice of warning and guidance. And so when it comes to the other stories of near-death experiences, with the exception of one book that I read in college, I actually did not read, I didn't research, didn't get on the internet or anything about anyone else's experiences until a couple of weeks after my book was published. And that's been really eye-opening for me. I still haven't read very many. I think 4 or 5 books in the last couple of months since the book's been out. And it's been a really neat experience for me, but it's been very eye-opening because I've had people tell me that my book has a lot of similarities to other near-death experiences, but I myself did not know that.
Well, that's to be expected if these people and you had similar experiences that
yes,
they would report. One of the most profound to me was the fact that you saw the missile fly from Libya to hit Israel. You were the second individual that I have interviewed who saw that scene. And can you describe that in a little more detail and the consequences of what you saw?
I can't go into a lot of detail. I have some details. Again, that's the boundaries thing that I need to stay within as far as the bounds the Lord has given me and my stewardship, because another concern many people have had is that, especially those of the LDS faith, concern being, why have our prophets and apostles, our leaders of our church, not talked about this? This has been preached for thousands of years, and they have been talking about it. We just need to study and read our scriptures and then let the Spirit teach us. And the details about something like Libya launching a missile, that specific detail may not be there, but I truly believe that if the Lord wants us to know that, He'll tell us that. For whatever reason, part of my experience was that I was shown this. And what I can share about that is that I do know that the United States is involved in that, as are many other countries within the UN. And that Libya launches the missile, but it's actually Iran who essentially kind of takes the credit for it, I guess. And it is launched towards Israel. I can't go into specifics as to how and when and all of that. Some of that because I don't know, and some of it because I don't have absolute clarity on.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show.
No one wants to face.
Welcome back, Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show. It's 3:23 in the Mountain West. Before I go back to Julie, I'm going to share an experience I had first thing this morning. I drove down to Orem, and I had a meeting with somebody there that this individual gave me a very important education. I have, as I've shared with the audience over a period of time, I have this feeling of urgency. And one of the things that I felt urgency about was getting a shelter. And I've already told you about Turtle Tough shelters, but this is something different because I also felt urgency to get food storage in.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I want to kind of tag on the back of what you just said. I am not familiar with the company you just mentioned, but I plan to do some research on them, so I appreciate that. But I will say that for those of you that do have food storage from other places, do not throw it out. Do not throw it out. I would even venture to say that if you have 30-year-old wheat, keep it anyway. Do not throw it out. And I just want to emphasize that. Don't throw it out, because it will be helpful, if not to you, to someone else. And we're going to see some miracles happen in the future, and some of that food that goes rancid will be made edible. So hang on to it. That's
important. Now, I want you to finish up what you had started.
With the Libya
yes.
thing. Oh, So yes, what I was shown is that Libya does launch a missile, and several governments are behind that. Similar to some other things that have gone on with Benghazi, and I could name a list of lots of things that we've seen going on that.
Well, you mentioned that
go misreported or unreported. Yeah.
You mentioned that the U.S. was behind this somehow.
It is. But I can't go into detail on that. But yes, just like the U.S. is behind a lot of things that we don't hear about, we don't know about. But that's about all I can say on that. Other than when it happens, people it'll happen. And
was this a nuclear device? Did you see a nuclear explosion?
I saw lots of different types of explosions, and I can't go into great detail, but I will say that
you did see nuclear explosions throughout the United States, as I remember.
All over the world, but yes, some in the United States. And specifically in Jerusalem, there will be the destruction of some of the Wailing Wall, some of the Jewish synagogue and other holy sites, as well as the Dome of the Rock. And that the Jewish people have for a long time been preparing to rebuild the temple, and that needs to be built where the Dome of the Rock currently is. And so those factors will all come to play going forward later on down the road.
I have been inside the Dome of the Rock. I took my family many, many years ago. I took my entire family to Jerusalem, and as much of the Holy Land. And it's a profound experience. It changes your life when you walk those grounds. And I'm not talking now about the tourist places.
Right. I can imagine. I haven't been there. I don't know how to say that. I haven't been there in my mortal body, Mills.
But you have seen it.
I have seen it. And
it's
a beautiful area. Yeah.
I was impressed with the Garden Tomb. And I just wonder if you have seen pictures, I'm sure, of the Garden Tomb.
Yes.
Is that the place?
That's one of those questions I'm not allowed to get specific on.
Okay.
It is definitely sacred ground.
Yeah. It is the only place that I saw in the entire Holy Land where there was a garden tomb overlooking a bus turnaround that's next to an outcropping of rock that looks like a skull. And as I looked at it, I said, this has got to be the tomb, and that has got to be Golgotha right next to it.
That must have been quite an experience for you.
Oh, it was. And the other profound experience was we stopped the buses on a little hillside overlooking a field down below, just a plain, ordinary little field, smaller than a football field. And we were told that that was Shepherd's Field, and right next to it was the city of Bethlehem. And against a slight slope, not a huge hill or anything, but just a slight slope, there were 3 little caves. And as I looked at those caves, I thought to myself, one of those is the birthplace.
So I don't know if I mentioned it in the book. I think in the last broadcast that we had, you asked me a question about whether or not I had been shown where Christ was born. I was not shown that. I'm glad you brought this up and give some clarity to that question. I've thought about it since. During my near-death experience, to my recollection, if I was shown that, I did not remember that. I will say that since then I have been shown that. And so, again, that's pretty amazing and wonderful that you've been able to see that. Sacred area.
Yeah, very definitely. There's so many things to talk about, but rather than to go back over the same ground that we covered before, because that show is in our archives, and anybody who wants to hear, and that was a pretty intense portrayal of the entire experience. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I'd like to focus on where we are now.
Okay.
And what lies ahead. I have said to my audience that I've had this very profound feeling of urgency to get prepared. And several other people have commented that they too have had that feeling of urgency. Are we running out of time?
The Lord's time is always perfect. We're not running out of time because the time has been set. And really, that's not going to change based on our actions. It's not like the Lord's going to, stay the time or that he's going to increase the time or anything based on our actions. But to clarify, maybe if I'm understanding you right, running out of time, I think probably what you mean is essentially how much time do we have before we aren't going to be able to have some of these things that we need: food, clothing, shelter.
Yeah, time to be prepared. That's what I'm looking
time
at.
is getting short. And what I will say, and this actually makes me think, I was just given more clarity, and I hope my publisher's okay with this because I haven't really discussed this. I didn't tell him to do this, but I feel like I'm supposed to share that book 2 is going to come out. For those, I've had a lot of messages sent to me, emails and messages that I don't know. I quit counting at about 600 that have come in the last couple months, and I've tried to respond personally to each of those. But as you can imagine, I'm a mother of 3 and a busy wife, and I have a lot going on in my life outside of sharing this message. So I have appreciated those that have written to me and expressed appreciation for the book and shared their thoughts and concerns, and also have asked questions. Going forward, it's going to be more and more difficult for me to answer those on an individual basis. And the Lord has made it known to both myself and to my publisher that there does need to be another book. And actually, just the night before last, as I was falling asleep, the name of the title of the book came to me. And that book, in part, will answer many of the questions that have been posed to me about what we need to do to prepare, and how we can prepare, and some of the details that'll have some of what we'll discuss today, and some other things maybe we won't get a chance to go to. And it is about the time is now. If that answers your question, Mills.
Yeah, it does.
The time is now. Do not delay.
You have just brought up something that I want to cover simply to satisfy a segment of the audience. I've got one individual whose call I will not take today, but I don't want to ignore what he has said. He is the penultimate skeptic. Former member of the church, became an atheist. These are his own pronouncements, not an accusation.
Has he pronounced that on the air?
Yes.
Okay.
And this individual says, well, they're just trying to get rich writing a book.
They, as in me or anybody else, writes a book?
You or anybody who's writing about near-death experiences.
He must not know how little we make.
I'm glad you said that. I too published, and I made the magnificent sum of 43 cents a book.
Yeah. My publisher's a little more kind than that, but I can tell you that I'm not in it for the money. I would love to be able to give every single person on the planet a book. It's that important.
Yeah, I agree.
I would love it. I would love for you all your whole audience and everybody to read the book because the message is important.
Well, in that regard, we've got to pause again. I apologize. We'll be right. Welcome back, Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show. We do have callers who are calling in with questions, and if you have questions, the Christmas Angel is here as producer today. Normally she comes in on Thursday, but she rearranged her schedule so that she could act as producer today while Julie was here. Julie, one of the complaints that I got was that your book was sold out everywhere in the valley. People had a hard time finding it. And I want to ask you where it is available. And we've already covered the fact that you're not in this for the money. But
Right.
but people have to be able to get it to be able to read it. You brought a few with you, did you?
Yes, I actually can't tell you how many I have. I have a few that are left over from a box that my publisher sent to me a month or so ago that I brought out with me.
6 or 8, something
like that. I don't even know.
Okay. If anybody were to be here at 6 when we get through, would you make those available to somebody who's
I can, but I need to tell you that I actually have to be gone by about 6:15 or 6:20.
So they have to be here a few minutes before.
I really can't stay longer than that. I have an obligation at about 7:30 in Provo, and I've got to pick kids up from a friend who's watching them at 7 o'clock.
Fair enough. Now, also, you're speaking again tomorrow, are you not?
Tomorrow night at the Logan Tabernacle. It's free. You don't need tickets or anything. It's open to the public. Would ask that you go ahead and spread that message to your friends and family, and hopefully we'll have a friendly audience.
Well, if you were in this for the money, you'd be charging.
Well, some would say that, right?
Yeah.
So it will be, it's scheduled to start at 7 p.m. If you could get there at least 15 minutes early, so we have everybody seated, we can get started right away. You'll hear a little bit, at the beginning, kind of an introduction, and then I'll speak. We're scheduled to speak till about 9 o'clock. And then, we are going to have kind of a meet and greet. If you have a book that you'd like signed, I'll be there, I can't remember the exact address, but it's a block or two away. I haven't been to Logan in years and not very often, but it's at a place called the Natural Philosophy Market, and my understanding is it's on Church Street. I can't remember if it's 155 Church Street or 55 Church Street. I should double check that, but Church Street, near the Logan Tabernacle, it's a Natural Philosophy Market, and the owner of that place has kindly let us come in to do that meet and greet. So if there are those there that would like to do that, we will have some books there, but I don't know how many. So.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the here and now. You've seen what we're going through and what we will be going through. It's not pretty, is it?
A lot of it is not pretty, but there is a lot that is. And what I mean by that is that, as we have increased times of darkness and tribulation, as is prophesied in the scriptures, when the days of the 7 years of tribulation start, it will absolutely be horrendous. The other side of that is, as there's increased powers of darkness, there will be increased light. And that's for several reasons. We have many of our ministering guardian angels that are very busy in the spirit world doing missionary work and other forms of helping those on the other side in their progression. And then there are those that are actually assigned to help us here on the earth in this realm. And my understanding is that more of them will then be put to use here to combat those other the darker powers, and also to aid us and protect us. So we have glorious days ahead of us, beautiful, beautiful, miraculous days, but we are headed for some very, very difficult days.
In that regard, what kind of travail did you see here in the United States?
I don't know where to start with that, Mills. My main message is supposed to be of light and hope and healing, but at the same time serve as a voice of warning. This is not just to be as a doomsdayer. I am not a doomsdayer, because I know this is part of God's plan, and I know that it's essential for us that we have a cleansing of the earth, a cleansing of his people within the church, without the church, cleansing of the earth, and here in the United States of America, where we are more and more becoming, where we have forsaken our God, and God will not be mocked. And it has been prophesied in all the scriptures. John spoke of it in Revelations. That was one of his main assignments, to write the book of Revelations, as well as Daniel and many of the other prophets. And while there will be great tribulation, there will be miracles. There are miracles every day all around us. Sometimes we just don't open our eyes or ears or open our hearts more than anything to feeling the love that is available to us and that is around us and recognizing the miracles that happen in our lives every day. But there will come a point in time where the powers of darkness will be so overwhelmingly real and so completely apparent. And in turn, the powers of light will be so overwhelmingly real and so completely apparent that there will no longer be an option for us to fence sit or to straddle back and forth or to pick and choose what we want to do from 1 minute, let alone one day to the next. It will come a point in time where it will be a matter of life and death, both physically, temporally, and spiritually speaking, that we choose who our master is.
One of the things that you have been shown is what happens here in our country as far as the government is concerned.
Yes.
And to the extent that you can talk about it, how corrupt will our government become?
It's pretty corrupt now, but it'll be much more corrupt than it is. And perhaps if I were one-on-one, with you, Mills, I could share things, but it's not appropriate for me to share that over the air. One of the concerns that individuals have had, particularly in the LDS faith, that has been brought to my attention and to others, is, who is this Julie? What makes her so special? Nothing makes me special, not any more special than any other of God's children, other than that we have a foreordained mission, and this is part of mine. And the other one is that they say she doesn't have stewardship. Those that believe in prophet and apostles and the organization of the church. What I will say to that is, I don't have stewardship. And so, although I have been shown things, I have to stay within the bounds the Lord has given me. And I cannot do that. I cannot cross those bounds, or I will lose the trust of our Father in heaven and of our Savior. And I will not have the Spirit with me. And every single one of us, probably the most important message that I am to speak about is how essential it is that we learn to identify and discern to the point that we can fine-tune how the Spirit speaks to us individually, so that as the days go on, we can know for ourselves every bit of truth, any truth that the Lord would have us know, and we can know how to direct our friends, our family members, and how we can help ourselves and our loved ones. And that can only come through the Spirit of the Holy Ghost.
One of the problems we face is there are a lot of members of the church and there are a lot of Christians who think the Lord is just going to protect everybody and they don't need to worry about a thing. That's not how I read the scriptures, and I don't think that's what you were shown.
No, there's not. Within the LDS faith, and there are other churches that will have, on a smaller scale, some places of refuge as well. And there will be protection from angelic beings, as well as from our own priesthood protection, and from the miracles that we will see happen based on the faith of those involved. However, that does not mean it's going to be easy. Anyone who has ever gone through a difficult time, which we all have, but those who will recognize and acknowledge it for what it is, when you have a tribulation or trial of any time, any kind of sorrow, suffering, you recognize that great learning and growth occurs. However, it does not come easily. And the Lord will cleanse His church. He will cleanse His people. And the purpose for that is that we are preparing for the return of our Lord and Master and the King of Kings. And before He can arrive and He can become and take His rightful place on this earth, we need to be a Zion people, and we need to be cleansed. And that means in every way. Temporally, physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, on every level. And included in that means that there will be a cleansing in the church, in the United States, in the world. And that'll happen in the places of refuge, in the camps. It'll be a refiner's fire like we have never known before. But those outside of the camps will suffer sorrow and tragedy and hardship that, in my opinion, don't even compare.
Let's start we're coming close to the top of the hour, and we're just getting started. But I want people to know what's coming. I want to talk about the plagues you've seen. I want to talk about the earthquakes that you've seen.
Okay.
And the roving bands and criminal behavior that you've seen, because I think it's important for people to understand why there is a gathering and what you saw as far as the gathering is concerned. Let's start with the earthquakes.
All right. First, I just need to say that this is a heavy topic. It's not my favorite one. Anyone who knows me and knows me well knows that I can be very serious when need be, but I actually do have somewhat of a sense of humor, and I like to lighten things up. But this is a topic that is of such a serious nature that even as you ask that, Mills, my tendency is I want to shy away and I'd like to crawl under this desk because I don't want to talk about this because it gives credence to the powers of dark. But I will say that as a voice of warning, the things I have been shown are horrific and they are beyond imagination. I don't watch rated R movies. I have never seen a horror flick in a theater. But my understanding is that what I have been shown is worse than any horror flick you can ever imagine has been made by man. And having said that, I'm sure there are those out there that can let their own imaginations at play. If you read in the scriptures in the book of Revelations, the plagues, there will be many. There'll be some very specific, some of which I address in the book, so I don't want to go over those again. If people are really interested in that, they can read the book and really get out their Bibles and other books of scripture. There will be plagues,
well,
pestilence.
one of the things that I think is important to understand is that it's apparent from your book that at least some of these plagues are deliberately caused and they are man-made.
They're man-made. And even as we speak, some of them have already been developed. And some of them are being developed and being, I guess, essentially fine-tuned. And it will not be long. And I'm talking, I can't prophesy and tell people specifically. I don't have stewardship for that, but what I will tell you is that now is the time. Do not delay in your spiritual preparedness and your temporal preparedness. And what I mean by that is that we need to make sure that when we are preparing, there's these prepper sites and these people that say they're preppers. I don't like that term because kind of makes people like that seem out like they're crazy. And this is not about being fanatical and crazy and going all out and getting a bug out. This is about using your brain, looking around you at the signs of the times going all around us in the world, and paying attention, and then opening your heart to the importance of the fact that there are some big things that have happened in the history of our world and that are now happening.
And we'll get into that when we come back. We've laid a foundation. We're taking your calls, and we'll get into specific answers coming up in the next hour. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show on K-Talk. Having more fun off the air than on the air. Right?
And Mills, that last question that I answered is not for the air, just you and me.
I respect that. I understand that.
Now they're going to all say, what was it, Mills? What was it?
Yeah, and I will not divulge the confidence. But, okay, some of the questions that were asked that we have not yet got to, let's just go through them quickly. How about diet? Does diet play any major part in what we should be eating? And part of the question was, what was the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? It wasn't an apple.
People are so funny.
Yeah,
I love it. Okay, the first one, diet, that's been given to us. We've got this thing called the Doctrine and Covenants. Just follow it, section 89. And read between the lines. The Spirit will help you on that.
Okay.
That's all I need to say about that. And, I could go into more detail, but I don't think it's necessary right now.
Okay.
What was the other one? The
fruit of tree of knowledge of good and evil. Can you describe that fruit at all?
I could, but I won't.
Okay. But it wasn't.
It was not an apple, but it looked delicious to the taste.
Okay. Okay, this is a good question, I think. There's been a lot of comment about Ebola. They've got the biggest outbreak in history, and it's getting into major capitals, and if it escapes that part of the world, this could be horrific.
Right. That was one that I was shown was coming. And so for me, when I saw this in the last several months, a year or so, with some of the outbreaks, it has the word alarm for me isn't quite accurate, but that's what's coming to my mind. It has been kind of a little warning light for me, a little alarm bell that's gone off as yet another bit of a wake-up call for me, as well as hopefully the rest of the world. That is one, and it will continue to spread.
You did see a man-made plague that was poured out in a major city. Do you remember which city that was?
I do, but I can't disclose what that is.
Okay.
Yeah. And it'll happen in more than one city also. It'll happen initially in one large city, and then they'll attempt it in others. In a couple of them, they won't be successful in attempting it, but it'll eventually spread. So.
All right. You did see some specific cities, though. For example, you mentioned the Leaning Tower of Pisa gets blown up.
Yeah.
And other Big Ben gets destroyed. And
other important monumental buildings, historical buildings throughout Europe and all over the world. I use those just as brief examples because those are places that I think your average American hopefully knows what they are. Well-known monuments. So if you can think of both in Europe and other parts of the world, but particularly in Europe and of course the Middle East, and then in the United States, if you're talking about significant monuments that have any historical, spiritual, or other type of relevance or meaning for those individuals or in that people, those people or those lands, essentially you can expect they're going to be destroyed in some way or another, either man-made due to false flags or by the actual destruction of foreign countries, and in some cases, members of our own government will destroy our own lands and monuments, and then also natural calamities and destructions. So.
You mentioned false flags. Does that begin to play a very important role in what's coming?
It's been playing a role for a long, long time, and it'll increasingly play a role.
A number of organizations, governments, groups are talking about an object, a planet, dark star, something that is approaching the Earth. Some of them refer to it as Planet X. Did you see anything like this?
I have. And there's that one, and there's others. There'll be some that'll get very, very close. We'll have some, I guess, little splinters off of meteors and other things from some before. And some of those are just preparatory for what's coming, for I guess you could say the ultimate final cleansing. But some of it is again just man's test of their faith and worry, and also signs of the times, and also just one of the reasons is it serves. There's natural laws in the universe that have been and always will be in play. And so anybody that studies any kind of science that has to do with earth sciences, physics and other things, could understand those from a logical scientific standpoint. But all truth, science, as well as spiritual religious truths, they all go hand in hand. There's really no conflict there. So, we're going to have them right along with the blood moons, and there is significance to the blood moons. Can't go into that, but there's always lots of fun speculation people make.
But the fact that these are occurring again on very specific holy days,
not coincidental.
No.
And what I will say to that, and I'll quote one of my favorite examples, and this is directly from one of my very, very good friends. I won't name who she is because I haven't asked her beforehand, but one of my friends who, as a dear friend of another one, it's one of those sister's friend of a friend, but this is one of my closest friends who's known about my experience. I said to her several years ago, the older I get, the more I realize things are not coincidental. And her response to that was, do you know what President Monson says about that? Now, those that are not aware of who President Monson is, he is the president and prophet and leader of the LDS faith. And she heard this directly from his mouth personally. And I heard this from her. What she said was, I said, the older I get, I realize things are not coincidental. And she said, do you know what President Monson says about that? And I said, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. And she said, President Monson says nothing is coincidental. So it's not coincidental that you meet certain individuals in your life. It's not coincidental that we have certain circumstances happen to us. It's not coincidental that we have the blood moons on those specific days. It's not coincidental that we're having meteors or anything else. It's all part of the grand plan.
And so are some of the travails we're going to go through. In your book, you talk about horrific earthquakes that cause havoc, including here in this valley. And
that was only a fraction, Mills, of what I put in that book, because it was going to the general population and to keep from causing fear and panic, because that is not of the Lord. It's not of the Lord to be a doomsdayer. It's not, or a fearmonger. What is of the Lord is to be a voice of warning. But I will tell you, and sorry to interrupt you, but I felt like I needed this. That's a small fragment, tiny sampling of what will be experienced on the earth. The earth is weighed down and absolutely sick, not just from the pollutions and everything and the mistreatment of the earth, but even more so in large part due to the wickedness and the negative energies and entities and everything that has happened on the history of the earth. The earth is sick and literally heavy and ready to be cleansed, weighed down. So, and that's part of it, is that'll help. There's several reasons why we're going to have those destructions, but that's one of it, is to actually help prepare the earth to be cleansed.
A lot of people sort of want to believe that they're not going to have to live through this, that they'll pass away before that, but we're going to live through this, aren't we?
Many of us, and some people will pass away. None of us know exactly for sure. I guess it's possible some people might know when they're going to pass away. For me, that's not been how the Lord works with me or most of the individuals I know. He doesn't give us exact dates and times, because then where would the faith be? Faith without works is dead, and faith is an action word. And so many of us will pass to their side, and many of us will live. And depending on the choices we make, and also what our foreordained missions are and what the Lord would have us do and where we can best serve, will all come into play. So for those people that look at maybe death as an easier escape, I get that. I can see that. If you were to look at the signs of the times and the things going on and knowing that we're in for some severe tribulations, there are those that literally will die of broken hearts. There are those that will literally give up the ghost because for fear they will, and then there will be those that will, by all accounts, should have not survived, whether it's due to plagues, whether it's due to some other sickness, whether it's due to an illness they've struggled with their whole life, a debilitating illness or disease that's life-threatening, and say they can't get their medication or they don't have their dialysis or anything. If it is the Lord's will, I know that those people actually will not only live through it, they will be healed. And
it seems that the real message that you have is, okay, yeah, these are bad things that are going to happen, but the Lord is in charge, not
Absolutely.
Satan.
Absolutely. Satan would have us believe that he is the big guy and that he's running the show. If anyone's ever met anyone who is like a pathological liar, and what I mean, somebody that tells a lie, or they tell so many lies that they begin to believe their own lies, And to an extent, Satan is part of that. He is the master deceiver. And I think to a degree, he knows this is a losing battle and he's not going to go out with a fight. But he also knows to a degree that he will, quote unquote, have his victory days for a while. So
I have been astounded by the open and notorious lying by top leaders in our government. And I mean, I'm not pointing fingers. It's open. Everybody has seen it.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. They lie about things they don't even
hide it. It's so blatant they don't even hide it. And that's nothing compared to what's coming.
That's interesting. Couple of questions. I'm going to take the second one first because it relates to what we were just talking about. For many of us, we see the government buying millions of rounds of hollow point ammunition for postal workers, etc., or for people in the Department of Agriculture, as though the government is preparing for an internal war. The question we have here is, will there be martial law in the U.S.? Are we going to face it here in Utah? Will there be a dirty nuclear weapon used in Utah? And will people be put to death at some point if they don't take the chip?
The answer is yes to all of those. And what is coming to my mind is those who have read the book or are otherwise familiar with the story of Hans Mill, when the saints were called to come to Missouri, and Prophet Joseph Smith asked them to settle in Far West. There were some that chose to settle in a small settlement called Hans Mill. Non-member of the church, actually owned the mills. He'd come out from the east, and there were disputations and problems with mobs and local Missourians that did not like the members of the LDS faith who were settling out there, and that's a complicated question, complicated conversation we could have. But to simplify it, if you are not aware of the story of Hans Mills, I encourage you to read up on what really happened at Hans Mill.
And because they didn't listen to the prophet at the time.
Yes, and the bigger message in some ways that pertains right now is that was the first step. But the other thing is that they were deceived by the messenger. And what I mean by that is the individual who owned Hans Mill and therefore employed and relied upon those members to support him and support his mills because they were working there. The saints were concerned, are we safe? Should we leave? What should we do? So they asked him to go ask the prophet Joseph. He went and talked to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith told him, tell the people that they need to gather at Far West. They should leave Hans Mill and come to Far West. That individual did not relay that message. Instead, what he did is he lied to the people, and he told them, Joseph Smith said, you'll be fine. You can stay here and defend yourselves.
Oh, boy. And
more complicated than that is that then 200 to 220 mobbed men, local Missourians, came. They sent some of their leaders. They came and they met with some of the other men at Hans Mill, and they came under the guise of, quote unquote, a peacekeeping treaty that they wanted to try to see if they could work something out. They never intended that. Their intention all along was to come in and massacre the saints at Hans Mill, men, women, and children.
Are you saying that could happen again?
It will happen.
It will happen.
And their technique was to first come in and say, for your own safety and your own welfare, and as a show of cooperation with us, the local government, as well as the citizens, hand over your arms.
Uh-huh.
So some of those, majority of the members of that LDS settlement handed over their arms. And within a matter of hours, or I think within a day or two, then the mob, in disguise, blackened their faces with paint, came over, knowing that the majority of the men were not armed, and they just massacred. It was a bloody massacre, and they shot men, women, and children. So if you don't know that story, research it. Get on LDS.org. That's where the true story is of LDS.org, is a true story of Hans Mill. And that is a type for what we will experience. But I do have to say that don't give up your arms, first of all, but also recognize that we do have places of safety. And all of that, this is not classy for me to say it, but I'm just going to say it. When the crap hits the fan, the majority of it's going to happen after we've been invited to gather. And for those that heed the counsel, we will be protected from that. We'll be protected from those kinds of chaos.
But you saw a large percentage of the saints who didn't listen when they were told to get.
Sadly, most don't.
Most don't. That is tragic.
Yeah.
That is tragic. And that's a word of warning for everybody out there. Interesting question, talking about the women's movement, these women who are militating to get the priesthood in violation of what they... Is there going to be wickedness of women following the adversary? Is that going to have a bad effect on the community?
I think that's probably a pretty common sense answer, because we see it now and we're going to see it increasingly so. But having said that, my heart goes out for those women and for those men, because what it says to me is they just don't quite understand the plan. They just don't quite understand yet. And so we need to be careful about our judgments, but we also need to be wise stewards, and we need to, that falls back into what I was saying earlier about learning to discern how the Spirit speaks to us and learning to discern. And, I can't say that enough, Mills, that we need to be able to discern so that we can discern the good, the bad, whether they're living or non-living, and in a very real sense, have that protection that the Lord is just waiting and willing to provide us now, and even more so in the future. And so those individuals, it's also never too late. I've had people in my life that have made choices, and I myself have made choices in the past where I have had great need to repent. And the Lord is a very loving, very merciful God. He is not a God of wrath and anger as some might portray. He is a man. All of the Godhead are personages of light and love, and they want us to succeed. They don't want to keep us out of the kingdom. They're not going to take agency away. It's contrary to the eternal laws, but they will do everything and anything in their power within those laws to gather their sheep and to bring their children home. And to persuade. In any way they can, and that are of the light. And that's complete opposite of the designs of the adversary. Well, I want to go back over an answer that you just gave, and I just blundered through a complete commercial break. My error. We're having too good of a time. yeah, true. Look, I want to reiterate. The question was, will there be martial law in the U.S.? The answer is yes. In Utah, yes. Will there be dirty nuclear bombs in Utah? Answer is yes. Will people be put to death if they won't take the chip? And the answer again is yes. So that is real, and that is going to happen. It is real. Here's an interesting question about classes. What classes can we take now to prepare? What skills are going to be most important to learn right now? And that's besides the spiritual things, which of course are preeminent. What classes? Yeah. Well, I can tell you I've had very little training in how to bear arms. But I think it's always great to have skills. Communication skills are going to be essential. There will come a point in time when communications, for various reasons, are either discontinued or interrupted. Ham radio is a great skill to have. If you don't know ham radio, it's a great skill to have. It's one that I'd like to develop. I know a little bit, but not enough. Alternative healing, and there's a broad spectrum there. I would just caution those that are involved in that you again discern, because the adversary can and will imitate anything of the light. So don't throw it all out and say it's all bad if people get freaked out about energy healing or anything else. Essential oils, energy healing, it is of the light, but there are those that are channeled through the dark. And so you need to pray about that and discern that through the Spirit. Satan wants you to throw it all away and say it's no good. The Lord wants you to discern what's of the light and what's not. So those kinds of things, obviously medical doctors, nurses, any kind of hands-on medical training will be essential. And what I'm finding is I've had so many, hundreds of people now contacting me saying not only have they felt impressed and an urgency to be prepared in food storage and other things, but they're having impressions of specific things that they need to learn. I was talking to a friend the other day, and she said one of her friends felt impressed to learn how to keep bees. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I'm allergic to bees. And my whole life, because I've been allergic, I have not really been fond of bees. And yet, bees are essential. For those that have heard, we actually have a shortage of there's a bee problem. But
they're dying off.
But I did see actually within the camps, those that need to be able to keep bees. There will be some beehives in some of the camps. And so that's a skill that maybe someone might feel impressed to learn. There are so many things on a preparation level, and they're all things that whether you go or stay will be important. They're important skills for us to have now. They're important skills for us to have through the tribulations, and they're important skills for us to have going forward in the eternities. So.
I want the audience to know that I didn't write that question.
I didn't know where that question came from.
Because I teach classes in self-defense. I've been at it for almost 60 years. And I actually, you met my producer. She's one of my students.
Oh, yeah, that's a good skill.
And I hope to get through life without having to harm somebody else. But the fact remains that the world is becoming a much wickeder place, and I'm afraid people without the skill are going to be in real jeopardy.
Yes, and I would say just if you have an impression, I've had several people say to me, I don't know how do I know if I'm having a prompting or impression from God? How do I know it's not just me, or how can I discern that? Well,
ignore it one time and you'll learn in a hurry.
You learn. Some of my greatest learning curves have come because I have failed to heed the Spirit. And because of that, I have sometimes, unfortunately, paid dear consequences. And other times, then I've been able to recognize. And so the more, it is true, the more you practice, the more you learn. And so
I'm shaking my head because the disasters I've had in my life have been when I have ignored the promptings.
Yeah, same with me. And going forward, there's going to be some things that we really can't afford to get it wrong. But what I will say as starting point, and even a beginning and continuing point, is that if it motivates you to do something that is good or of the light, does it really matter if you know if it came from God versus your own brain? Because the way that the Lord works through the Holy Spirit is He doesn't command in all things, and He wants us to learn. And once we learn that, then He doesn't necessarily have to tell us every time. And so it can come from us, and it can come from the Lord, and we give credit to the Lord no matter what. And those ministering angels, our ancestors and those on the other side of the veil, they literally whisper in our ears and inspire us. And we might have thoughts and impressions come to our mind. Act on them. If they're of the light and they're good, then they're of God. Act on them. If they're not of the light and they're not something good, well, then you can recognize the source there, and you do what you need to do to get rid of that. And then focus on the light. Thoughts are energy, so focus on the light. Focus on hope. Focus on love. Focus on gratitude. And you will find that it will come back tenfold, and it'll help kind of open up the way for you to increase your faith. And they all go hand in hand. And the scriptures say that without charity we're nothing. But in order to have charity, we have to have faith and we have to have hope.
Did you see 9/11?
Some of it.
The question here is almost political. Was it caused by our government, or was it, as it has been portrayed, caused by Saudi Arabians?
Okay, so I can't go and say that, yes, Gadiantons on every level were involved.
This question, I think, is almost self-evident. What do we have to do to be cleansed? I know.
Where do you even start with that? That is individual.
And it's
what I need to cleanse me may be different than what somebody else needs to be cleansed. And hopefully we work on it and we do what we need to do to cleanse ourselves through the power of the atonement, rather than,
and it all goes back to Jesus Christ,
forcing the Lord's hand, because my hope is that I can get to the point that really we should ideally be at a place where we recognize immediately when we've erred and we correct it immediately. And I guess eventually we get to the point where we're making few and fewer mistakes, but we're never going to be perfect on this earth. That's why we have a Savior and why we have the atonement.
And that's the mission of Jesus Christ.
It is. And recognizing that He is the Savior of all mankind, every man, woman, and child on this earth and in the eternities. And so He's already suffered for us, and to not utilize that is not only foolish, but it's needless. It's needless because the price has already been paid, and we need to accept that gift in our lives. One of Satan's greatest tools is discouragement, and that when we have messed up on whatever level, he tries to convince us that it's too late, that we're too awful, that we're sin-bound, and one of his greatest tactics is shame. Shame. If you are feeling shame in your life, that is not of the Lord. Shame is different than guilt. Guilt is due to a natural consequence of poor choices or wrong choices we've made, and it's given to us through the light of Christ, and that's how we know that we need to make a correction. That is different than shame. If we have done something wrong and we have made it right through confessing it and correcting it, we need to forgive ourselves and move on, and we need to accept that gift, because to fail to do so only gives the adversary power. And until we let go of that, we cannot move forward.
When I first read this next question, I thought it was accusatory, but as I reread it, I don't think so. I think there's genuinely seeking an answer. Why do you have to remain so obscure or quiet about so many things that you've seen?
There's going to come a day where everyone's going to know. And I'm looking forward to that, when the veil is gone and it's okay, and everyone will just know. We'll all know, wow, that was your mission, and now I get it. I've been told a little bit as to why the Lord has chosen to do this way. My main understanding is that it's not a secrecy thing, it's a sacred thing, and I know we hear that, and those that are not of our faith criticize that about our temples and things like that, but it's actual factual truth, and that is that some things are just meant for me, and I don't have stewardship. It is wrong for me to tell any other individual what choices would be right for them to make. And it's a very fine line, and I face very heavy consequences if I cross that. And I'm not willing to do that. And so I would rather err on the side of caution than go to the edge and fall over. And the other thing is that it's a trust thing. When anyone trusts you with anything, and particularly here we're talking about the Lord, that's no small thing. And we all know that it's much easier to keep trust than it is to regain trust. And additionally, there are just some things that are too sacred. it might be appropriate for me to have a conversation with you, but I'm not going to put it all over the internet, and I'm not going to put it in a book, and I'm not going to say it on air. And I don't know the intents of an individual's heart unless I'm able to discern that, and the Spirit tells me. And I can't know what some guy in Virginia or New Hampshire or southern Utah, what their motive or what their intentions are, and what they could do to twist and turn my words, or to wreak havoc and try to disrupt and cause those things that are meant to be of the light to be for good and helping, and try to do something that's not of the Lord. So,
did you see the Mountain Meadow Massacre?
Yes, but I don't have a lot of clarity on it. So I remember basics, but not enough, and it's really not something that I'm, my experience has been if that's something the Lord wants me to know more of, and especially to share, then I would have clarity on it. So really can't get into it.
Okay. 10 tribes return. Next 5 to 10 years, do you think, or later, before the second coming, do you have any clarity on that?
Well, we all have our time here on Earth. I have some clarity. I can't give you specifics because, again, I don't have stewardship. And also, there are some things that were made known to me to help me have clarity and understanding as it pertains to my life and how long I may or may not be on the earth. What I can say is that my understanding is that it'll happen in my lifetime. I'll be 42 in January.
Okay. This next question is pretty presumptuous. First of all, I will read it the way it was asked.
Okay.
And I won't let you answer it.
I can't believe somebody has a presumptuous question. How dare they?
Okay. The question is, what is God's position on homosexual marriage? And I will not allow you to try and speak for God. I know.
I was going to say, wow. Well, maybe that individual should ask God.
Yeah, maybe so.
He's already given his word. Read it in the Bible.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh, but we're going to take a pause, and we'll be right back here. Some of these questions are I'm sorry, they're quasi-political. I'm not going to...
That's okay. I'm going to inject real quick. I said it a little earlier. I'm going to make sure. The message I have is I needed more research on that, so thank you, Mills. If you have food storage, no matter where you got it from, do not throw it out.
Good.
If it's 30-year-old wheat, do not throw it out.
Well, hey, there is wheat that have been found that is centuries old that still has the life term in it.
Right. And depending on where you end up in the future, either you or someone else may need that. And I have been shown that there will be ways that even some of those foods that go bad can be purified. So
that's great to hear. Okay. Children coming across our borders, current event. They're flooding in by the hundreds of thousands.
They are. Yeah.
Is this part of an invasion of our country?
It's the beginning. And it's been prophesied in Scripture and that there'll be more coming in from our borders. Both from the north and from the south.
Do you see this as part of the mobs that will go through our land like a lion?
Absolutely. This is just a little precursor to kind of desensitize us. But again, I need to emphasize, for those that actually heed the call to gather, we're not going to be protected from everything, but because it's a cleansing for all of us. But those things will occur after. Those will occur after.
Okay, you may not want to comment on this question. This one comes from me, so I take responsibility for it. If you don't want to answer, I understand. We have a presidential election coming up in 2016. There has been a lot of speculation over things that are going on in our government right now. The fact that the last election was stolen,
The last two.
The last two. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. And there may not even be another one. Do you have any comment about that?
When you're invited to gather, you need to join. Gather.
Don't delay. Don't
delay. The time, yeah. And I have been shown some of that, and I don't want to. I just need to be careful with how I say this so that my words are not misconstrued. My understanding is that martial law will be declared after the gathering.
Anybody better be paying attention, it seems to me. Now, I have said on the air that I've had this feeling of urgency. And I've been very careful to tell people, look, I'm not saying this is for you or your family. I'm not saying get packed and ready to go. I'm saying get prepared, because when we're told to bug out, you can't prepare then.
No. We still need to be planting our cherry trees. Some of you might know what that means already. So you still need to live your life. Spiritual preparedness goes hand in hand with temporal preparedness. If you are preparing spiritually the way you need to be, the Spirit will prompt you in how you need to temporally prepare.
This next question, I don't know if you're going to... I'll give you the...
That sounds loaded.
Well, I've given you a warning. Was Muhammad a real prophet or a misguided one?
That's not part of the mission I have in testifying and witnessing.
Fair enough. We'll just let that go. I want to get away from some of the questions for a couple of minutes. I want to go back to some of the things in your book and some of the things that you've seen, because I think that's important. We've talked about the fact that there are going to be plagues. In this valley, you saw a couple of major earthquakes. Describe for the audience what you saw, if you would.
Well, I've heard from a few friends that you've had a couple of earthquakes in the last month or so here, somewhere in Utah. Is that correct, Mills? There some small ones?
Little ones.
Right. Those are the beginning warning earthquakes. There are going to be a few other little warning earthquakes, maybe a little bit bigger than what you've had, or some the same. And the really, really big ones will come. And I forget what the question was. Did I see that? Yes, I did. I've seen it many times.
Yeah. Okay, but describe what you saw, because
earthquakes,
most people
hurricane-like winds and tornadoes, lightning, thunder, mudslides, water coming up from the earth, the lakes heaving beyond their bounds, the rivers, complete chaos. And lots of flooding. Obviously, really, actually, I was thinking of it as I was driving here. I came from Pleasant Grove to your studio, and we're in South Jordan, right?
Yes.
So, point of the mountain, just going to slide right off. The temples will be protected. There will be maybe some damage done to them, but they'll be protected. They'll still withstand. But entire homes just demolished, and it's truly horrific. But
before or after the gathering?
After
the gathering. Okay.
And one of the reasons I know that is because what I was shown, which pertains to my family, is that we come from the Midwest, from the Kansas City area, and travel a route that brings us south and then up through New Mexico, Arizona, up through Price Canyon. And we stop in Utah County for a night or two before we head on to the rest of our destination, which is in a camp further north. And we have to travel the highways that go through Wasatch County, through Utah and Salt Lake, and through I-15 area. And I was shown that when those earthquakes occur, the highways will be impassable.
Interesting. And you were able to travel.
We traveled.
You
yes.
traveled them then, but.
And when we traveled, there was a real sense of urgency. Real sense of urgency.
I think it's beneficial to give an indication, if you feel it's appropriate, of how the message will be given to the saints that it's time to leave.
In my area, I was shown that it will come through a broadcast. There'll be a letter read from the First Presidency, but it'll also come directly from the prophet in the First Presidency through a broadcast. I can't speak for every area of the country or the world because I wasn't shown that. Again, I don't have stewardship and it doesn't pertain specifically to me, but I was given kind of a general overview of maybe types or examples of what would be representative of what's going to happen. It won't come just from your bishop or your stake president. It will be official communications through the First Presidency.
So a meeting perhaps where
yes.
The message from the brethren would be read.
In our area, the meeting will either be 6 or 7 o'clock at night, depending on where we are, whatever ward or stake. And that's probably the most common time that people choose to have the meeting. Mm-hmm. In some areas, depending on circumstances, locations of the buildings, how far people live away, and those kind of things. Sometimes they might have to have it right after church, if people need to travel a great distance, and so they might do it right after church or in the late afternoon. We all have different meeting schedules and those kinds of things. So those factors will come into it.
And my guess is, and this is simply a guess, and it's okay. in the form of a question, as it is with most meetings, there'll be members who'll say,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Be lots of members that'll say, I don't want to go to that.
Yeah.
You want to be at that meeting. The other thing I actually saw was that, and I think this will resonate with anybody who's had small children, for various reasons, we will be encouraged to have both, if we're married, to have both spouses at the meeting. No one's going to force it. We will be encouraged. There will be cases when one or the other spouse, and often both spouses, will choose not to attend. And sadly, in some situations, I think it's probably the minority. I did see that in some cases, the individual, whether it's the wife or the husband that goes to that meeting, actually goes home, and when the spouse asks what was the meeting about, they don't really give the message, similar to Joseph Hahn not giving the message to the saints.
Wow. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and we're going to pause again for station identification for top of the hour news. Then we'll be back with my guest, Julie Rowe. Oh, by the way, she has 13 books here. Now, you've got an hour to get here because she can't stick around afterwards. But she does not have change, so you'll have to either bring a check or I guess
I won't take a check.
Oh, you won't take a check?
Yeah, because I'm not going to be home for about 3 more weeks.
Oh, okay. So cash or
exact cash. I have a Square account that I can use if somebody wants a debit or credit card. That's fine too.
Okay, but you've got an hour to get here. But before we even take another call, you wanted to make a comment about...
I do.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks, Mills. So I'd like to thank, first of all, I haven't had a lot of time, nor do I take a lot of time to, I guess, essentially surf the internet. I've had some people email me and let me know that I guess apparently my book is being, and I guess my experience is being discussed on some forums. I don't really know even which ones they are. I saw and logged onto one. And so I'm starting to get a little idea that there's some discussion going on, and that is great. I think it's wonderful. I appreciate those who are having the discussion and spreading the message, because again, this is not about me. This is about the Lord.
But let me give you one word of caution here. There are professional antis out there.
Yes, there are.
And they want to discredit anybody who has had an experience that is faith promoting that reaffirms a belief in Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And if anybody runs across one of these anti-websites and they're trying to tear down your story or anybody else's near death, run, do not walk.
Right. And if you feel impressed to do so, please come to my defense and post something, because I'm not going to have the time, the energy, the ability, and I am not to go around essentially defending my story or myself or the message the Lord has. I'm to witness. I'm to testify. There is nothing to defend. It is the truth, and I will not be put in a position where I need to defend. Although there are times when I will, and I have. I don't know how many reviews are on Amazon. There have been a couple that I've responded to that I think, they weren't what I would even say negative. I felt like they needed some clarification and some understanding. Then on some of these forums, it's come to my attention that there are those that are stirring the pot and doing anything they can to dissent or take away and distract from the message that the Lord would have us know. And to those I say, stop it. You do not know what you're messing with, and I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the ultimate higher power.
Father wouldn't have given you this experience if there wasn't if there was no purpose behind it.
And I can tell you it is no easy thing to do what I'm doing, and the only reason I'm able to do it is because I know what I know, and I have a conviction, and because I have such a strong love for our Father in heaven and for our Savior, and I have such respect for their knowledge and their power, that I fear man far less than I fear God, to the point that I almost fear no man because I know who my master is. And having said that, I don't want to have them, bring it on, because that'll happen. I have had several years of preparation, and I've had some intense couple of months. And if there's a bad name that's been called that he can call me, it's already started to happen. But that will not shake my faith, nor will it shake the testimony of the witness that I'm going to give. So they really should just, save their energy. But what I will say is that is not a challenge. I am not challenging anybody when I say that. I just simply want to say that the Lord loves all of his children. And those who are the most anti, whether it's anti-Mormon, anti any other religion, anti-Jewish, those are anti, religion of any kind, or anti of the light. I like to think that it's because they're just confused and they just don't know. And it helps me, it softens my heart there, because I think when there are those that do that on whatever level, it's not of the light. And so this isn't about me. This is about what does the Lord want us to know. And so, to me, that's kind of the end of the conversation. And whenever we're faced with opposition of any kind, we have a couple different choices. We can back down from it, or we can recognize what it is and where it came from and what the source of that opposition is. And opposition is part of the plan. And sometimes having that opposition gives us the absolute clarity. So actually, in a way, this might sound kind of twisted, I'd like to thank those who have been opposing me and who will continue to oppose me, because what that will do, not only has it given me more clarity and understanding and greater faith, you've given me a sure knowledge of absolutely how important this message is. And it also, while you think you're destroying, what you're actually doing is helping those who are seeking truth and knowledge and do have faith. You're helping them to get the clarity that they need.
One of the things that I think is important to look at, you're not saying a single thing that contradicts either the scriptures or the words of the brother. Absolutely nothing that you have said runs counter to or in any way contradicts. Am I in error on that?
No, you're not. And I would hope that if there comes a day that I ever do, that somebody will call me on it.
Okay.
Because that's what I would do for my brother or my sister.
Look, in that regard, the scriptures talk about the gathering of the wheat and the tares, and that there will be a separation in the last days.
Right.
And I'm assuming that, and I'm sort of paraphrasing several questions that have come in that reflect this. Did you see any of this separation between? You're laughing, obviously.
I don't mean to lapstick it light. It's just that's such. Yes, it's been going on. It's going to keep going on, and it's just going to intensify. But it's going to. It's necessary, and anything that's in the scriptures, there's always a purpose for it. It's always representative, written for our day, and it's for our understanding and our learning and our growth, and for us to help do what we need to do. And so it wouldn't be in the scriptures if it were not going to come to pass.
Okay. Would you say that this movement of a group of women that are trying to grab hold of the priesthood, is that part of that separation, do you think?
My feelings on that are personal, so I'm not going to go into that. But what I will share is that there are lots of siftings going on all over. And most often, we sift ourselves.
That's what I've observed as well. I think that's well said. This question begs a little bit. I'll ask it, but then by way of clarification, because there are two separate things here. This question is, what type of transportation will we use to get back to New Jerusalem? But the gathering isn't going back to New Jerusalem, as I understand.
No, there's going to be the initial gathering, and then later on, there will be specific individuals who will be called to go to establish the New Jerusalem. Not everyone. There will be people specifically assigned to do that. And then other people will be asked to go back, sometimes in some cases back to their original homes and lands and places, and sometimes they're going to be asked to go to foreign lands. So at that point in time, there'll be different types of transportation, but I would say the primary mode of transportation is by foot. And that's also prophesied. You can read that in the scriptures. And one of the reasons it's good to pay attention to some of those early pioneer stories.
That's not going to be any fun.
I don't know. I like singing church hymns.
When you were shown your experience, did you see any undiscovered species of animals on the earth that are yet to be found?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what they are because I don't remember all their names. I have impressions in my mind, and I remember that was explained to me. And then I saw many that have been on the earth that are not on the earth now. And so, yeah.
How about Yeti?
Yeti?
Yeah.
What a creature. So my kids were asking about this because Bigfoot is near and dear to us. So for all those people that, might criticize and just try to explain me away as some crazy lady, I'm going to give you a little ammunition. Do some research on Bigfoot.
So it's real then?
I think if somebody were to research it, they could come to that answer themselves.
Okay.
That's just funny little tidbit. That's one of those things that really is not part of my mission, and it can just distract, so we don't want to focus on it. But thought I'd lighten it up a little because we got all this heavy duty stuff, and for fear, I don't want the listeners to think that I'm such a bore. But the other thing is that honestly, any truth, if the Lord wants us to know it, no matter what it is, He'll make it known to us. And anything that's scientific, true science, because it can be falsified, and it has and is and will be, true science absolutely goes hand in hand with all true doctrine.
Gee, that makes me think about global warming.
Here we go. Okay,
no,
that's
such an obvious fraud. I mean, anybody who does a modicum of research knows that whole thing, as a matter of fact, everything is getting cooler.
Right. But there are weather pattern changes going on, but I would say, again, look to the scriptures for that and just take that, if anything, take that as a sign of the times that we're in. So.
Now, this question is very interesting. Will it only be the saints that are gathering in the tent cities before the earthquake, or will just ordinary people be gathering as well? And how many antichrists will there be on the earth at this time?
Wow. Where to begin? Okay, so the tent cities, there'll be regular tent cities. There'll be places, what I refer to as the places of refuge, which are organized, designed, and set up and established in properties owned by the LDS Church. There'll be other denominations that'll also have their own tent cities and places. And then there will be those places of refuge that later on will become cities of light. And quite honestly, discussing that over the air to a general audience is not an appropriate setting to give more clarification at this time. But there will be tent cities, and even within the places of refuge, there will be some non-LDS members. And within the camps, there will still be baptisms. There will still be family history work and those kinds of things that are pertaining to the eternal purposes that God has for us will still be going on. Just think third world country. And when it comes to tent cities of whatever denomination, after we are called to gather and then, the foreign troops and natural disasters really start hitting, there is safety in numbers. And so people will naturally start to congregate into groups and tent cities. Either because they've lost their homes or there's not electricity or communications. And so they gather and essentially have their own tent cities that they establish. But, so they're going to be all over the place.
There will be safety in that group then.
Varying degrees of safety depending on where you are.
Okay, and now you saw your husband out on patrol, as I recall.
I did.
And that means that we will be responsible for defending ourselves in those circumstances. As far as timing is concerned, one of the things that you mentioned has to do with your husband's hair. Would you reiterate that?
I'm sure he's going to love this. First of all, I just need to put it out there to the world that I'm married to the most amazing man. And I still think
We're going to have to hold that.
Oh, whoa, here we go.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Drive Time Live, the Mills Crenshaw Show on K-Talk. Back, it's 5:23 in the Mountain West. The time is flying by.
It's 5:23. We have like a half an hour left, Mills?
A little more than a half an hour, yeah.
All right.
Now, we've got to get back to your husband's hair.
Well, first, I left him with that teaser about my husband. I got to put it out there to the world that I absolutely do have the most amazing husband in the world. He has been so supportive of me, and I could not be or do any of this without his support. And I'm very grateful to him and for my 3 children who are just such good kids. So his hair, yeah, he's going to love that I'm talking about this on the air. What I was shown is at the time that we leave the Kansas City area and go to places of refuge, he has about as much hair as he has right now. He's losing a little bit on top. He's got very dark hair, really great hair, and he has about that much. And he doesn't have very much gray, and right now he's just barely starting to get gray. I mean, we're talking like so little gray that from a distance you couldn't tell he has gray.
So if you were to guess, would you say that the change would be about that would happen in the next 2 to 3 years?
Rather than answering that like that, let me give an example. And I'm going to say this and kind of take it with a grain of salt. And I've said a lot of things today that like you said, they're going to be the naysayers. They're going to be the antis. There's going to be people that are well-intentioned that will just misunderstand or misread what I've said and misinterpret. And they may twist and turn or relay some of what I've shared and the message won't get through clearly. So as a word of caution, I just kind of ask people that if you find this has been of interest to you, I just appreciate it if you would have people log on and listen to this show so they can hear with their own ears and discern with their own heart rather than you interpreting it for them, because the message can be lost there. And in terms of the timing of things, what I will share, and I share this is, wow, I'm going to need to pause right now because something that I will say, and I'm just going to put this out there, is that the veil is very thin for me. And I'm not going to go into detail on that other than to say that I, in a very real way, experience both the light and the dark and the impact they can have. And what I'm about to share with you, those of the dark do not want you to know. So take heed and listen. We've been married over 18 years. We always buy used cars. Our pattern has always been that we keep our cars for approximately 5 years because we buy older cars that we can pay cash for. On a couple occasions, we've had to take a car loan for a little while, within a year or so and pay it off. So we always do what we can afford. My husband is very mechanically inclined, and that helps us when, because we are able to buy older cars. That's much the reason, because he knows how to work on the cars. So and this is actually all him. I kind of just follow his lead. Our pattern has been that he researches the cars, and then together we decide what vehicle is right. When I had my experience, I was obviously shown that we were caravanning out of his family as well as other people in our area, in the Kansas City area, and we were driving westward. At that time, I was shown what vehicle we were driving. I never told him what that was. All I said was it was an SUV. On one occasion, I may have told him it was a dark-colored SUV. But actually, I don't even remember. I just know I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him the style. I didn't tell him the type. I didn't even say specifically that it was a full-size SUV. Last December, it was time for us to purchase another car. Our cars had gotten older, and it was time. He came across a car. He had been researching cars for over a year and had decided on a different make and model. We would discuss it, and I would kind of say, as you do as married couples, yeah, that's a great car. Have you thought about such and such? And I never once suggested the actual make and model of the car that we purchased. I left that up to him. We narrowed it down, and immediately the Spirit said, he found it online, and the Spirit said to me, that's your car. We were not yet planning to buy a car. We were going to hold off until after tax return time. A week went by, and he couldn't get that car out of his brain. He brought it back up on the internet, and we had some car trouble with another car, and I'll spare you the details, but essentially what I'll let you know is that we ended up that afternoon going car shopping, and we went and saw 8 to 10 different cars. The first one we saw was the one we ended up purchasing, and it's the one that I was shown in 2004. We never keep a car more than 5 years. We were driving that car to the place of refuge.
Interesting. Very interesting. How much can you talk about the upcoming election in 2016?
You say can. How much can I or how much will I?
How much will you?
I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
Because it's irrelevant to the purpose of the message that I have, which is get your houses in order and heed the call. And get prepared. Yep.
One of the questions that I completely bypassed has to do with companies that are involved in preparation and so on. I don't think that would be an appropriate question for you.
What's that specifically?
Well, do you know companies that are involved in helping people get prepared?
I don't personally know them. I know there are several, and obviously we have the internet, which is a great resource. But of course we know we can't trust everything on the internet. So
well, I mentioned earlier when I talked about Eden Valley. I had a huge education just this morning in food, and I was astounded to find out how much we're being lied to about food storage, for example.
Right.
And I think the point that you made, you never throw this stuff out.
You don't. And I will say it's better to have that than to not have anything at all. Do not throw it away. If you have that, or if you know someone that's going to throw out their food, ask them if you can have it. And it's, in my opinion, it's better, even if, and there will be ways to purify it, and I'm not going to get into that, but if you were literally starving, it's better to eat something that's maybe not of the highest nutritional value, maybe even it's a little rancid. You'll still live.
Yeah.
Unless it's super, super poisoned. And there can be that. I do need to put a word of caution out. It's been made known to me. And I will say, during my experience, this was made known to me, and then since then, that going forward in the future, there will continue to be those who will come up with kind of like these miracle cures, what I call snake oil. I'm not talking about essential oils. I'm talking about, and this is where you need to discern. You study it out and you research it on your own, but I will put a word of caution that I was warned that there are those who will claim that they can either prevent or cure the coming plagues. They are either deceiving or they themselves are deceived and seek to deceive.
So anybody who's claiming that they can cure these plagues.
First cures, there is not a cure-all for the plagues. There are going to be so many different plagues and man-made. There's not a specific cure. There are some that will help, like some of the essential oils and things like that. But just beware of plague begons.
Okay.
And I can't speak because I don't even know the ones that are out there, Mills. I just know for whatever reason that was a message that I was told about. So I don't even know if there is anything called plague begone out there. It's been made known to me recently through a few people that there are people that are making some of their own oils or something. I can't speak for them. I don't know. I don't know their experiences. I have been shown that there are people that will even claim that they've had, divine intervention and even angels and stuff that have told them how to make it. And I will say that not every angel is an angel of the light.
Good counsel. Interesting question. We talked about this a little off the air. Do you see anything with the Yellowstone caldera happening soon? Roads melting now, so to speak.
Well, you just mentioned that at the little break, and I let you know I'm actually going to be up in Yellowstone area for a family reunion next week. That was something I was shown as, I guess, a little sign that we're getting closer of I haven't had a chance to research it yet, but somebody did send that, a message to me that's going on in Yellowstone and asked me what I thought of it. I've been so busy I haven't had a chance to even look to see what's really going on other than I did immediately recognize it. And so just pay attention to that. Use our brains. The Lord gave them to us for a reason, and don't do anything foolish. But if they have an area that's closed, stay out of it. So, I don't know what else, with that question.
Well, I think, the question is, does that gigantic caldera cook off, anytime in the near future? But as we talked about in the break, from what you have seen, that would be much later, much toward the cleansing period rather than anything that's before the Savior comes.
That's what I believe. I don't have total clarity and recollection as to the timing of that. If it was made known to me, I don't remember it, which tells me that the Lord doesn't want me discussing that, and He doesn't want me knowing that, either because it's irrelevant to whatever is going to happen in my life and my purpose and mission, or it's irrelevant to why He chose to have me give this message. It's not part of the message I'm supposed to give. And so we really, pay attention to what's going on and be wise, but we don't need to be fearful. We need to have faith.
in the right people and in the right
Well, that's more of a
principles.
trust thing.
Yeah. Well, in that regard, there's no question you've seen deception and evil at the highest levels of government.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And it's going to get worse?
There are no words. I really, honestly, I don't know how I would even begin to express. And perhaps that's also because I'm not supposed to, because, again, the message is putting your trust and your faith in the Lord and His plan, and not getting caught up in being fearful and the doomsday and all the awfuls, because we are living in a beautiful day and age. And I wish there were a way that I could vividly explain and elaborate on how absolutely glorious it's going to be and how magnificent the experiences we will have. And we can have them now, Mills. We just need to open our hearts.
Great counsel. Julie, one of the questions, I'm just going to ignore a couple of these, but...
And before you do, I'd say a couple things real
Sure,
quick that came to me during the break. First one is, what has kept coming to me in the last 15 or 20 minutes is in reference to preparations and food storage. I know of this really great place. They're all over the country. You can go in now, pick it out, purchase it, and take it home. It's just the basics of food storage. And my understanding is the last time I was into one of these great places called the LDS Church Cannery is that sadly they have had fewer and fewer people coming to the cannery. I'm not sure why that is. It should be increasing. So I just want to put that plug in. And I will say, they don't know I'm saying that. I am in no way representative of the LDS Church. I'm not getting any money for it. I get no feedback. Hopefully they're not going to be mad at me because I in no way want to come across as being representative of them. But I will say that for my basics, that's where I've gone, and they have great prices and
high quality.
High quality, and you can trust the source.
Yes. And I will say this, because we've relied on some of that food. Their pre-prepared mashed potato powder is incredible.
We like the potato pearls. They're pretty good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the little pearls that turns into mashed potato, and you put it in hot water, and it is fantastic. You can't tell it from all of the work you go to peel a potato, boil them, and then mash them. Taste identical. It's wonderful.
I don't know if I'd say they're identical, but they're pretty good.
Well,
that's a good endorsement, Mills.
I really enjoy it. Anyway.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to say too is that I want to thank so many who have sent me encouraging messages, and thank you for that encouragement, for your thoughts and prayers. I have felt it. I continue to need it. If you can continue to please help in that area, and also just let you know that that there will be another book coming out this fall, and we will address many of the questions that have been posed through those emails. So I've already been inundated, so I use caution when I say this, but I do want to encourage you in the next 3 to 4 weeks, if you have the time and you read the book, if you would like to send me a message of questions that you feel you would like answers to that could possibly be addressed in that book. The majority of the book is going to be basically answering those questions. Obviously, there are many things that I can't address, but of those things that I can, we will include them in the book. And I just want to reiterate that the time is now.
And now means now. This question, I think, is important. When we go to the temp cities, do we go with our entire families, or do we go as wards or stakes? That's going to be at least partially, I would assume, an individual answer. But basically, from what you've seen, Julie, do you think that most people will go as stakes or as wards or just as families individually?
Some of both. The church is an organization organized by stakes, and so those are not details that we need to each be concerned about. I say that because the Lord has a plan for all of us, and we just need to trust Him. And there will be so many different circumstances that I can't speak for each individual, but I will say that is a question we're going to address in the book, and I will try to get a little more specific than I am on air right now, but that's about all I can say about it right now.
Okay. Did you get a feeling of how long we'll be in the tent cities before things really fall apart?
Several years. Oh, you mean how long they're going to be in the tent city? Sorry, I was distracted signing a book. Before they really fall apart? Mm-hmm. That's a relative term. They're going to start to fall apart before, but really, really fall apart depends on, there are some of us that are going to be asked to kind of stay behind to help us in things. So within a matter of weeks before some of the things will come to fruition, enough that, and then some things won't happen for quite a long time. And so that's kind of a complex question, but let me illustrate with an example. If you look at the scriptures, both throughout the Bible and other books of scripture in the Book of Mormon, there are patterns that we can find there. For instance, if you look at the story of Lot and his wife, as the Lord told them, he knew in advance, and then the Lord told him when it was time to go, and when it was time to go, they had to get out, and they got out quickly. And then they were not to look back. Same thing when Lehi led his family out of Jerusalem. He knew for many years that the day would come that he would need to leave his family, so they prepared. And then when it was time for the Lord to tell him, okay, it's time to go, then they had to act, and they had to act quickly and obediently. And what some may not maybe recognize or even know or recall is that in many of those stories, and it's the same thing, you look at the days of Noah, and in days of Noah, 120 years, it was like 120 years that he preached repentance and tried to prepare the people. And that's no different than us. If you look at the history of even just the LDS church, we've been giving guidance and warnings for years now, for decades. And so as we get closer, then when it's time, it will be time. And the time is short, meaning that we are really getting closer. And so we need to be ready to act. So we do need to have our preparations in order and not to hesitate and not to look back. And there will be those.
That is critical because I want to make this very clear, and you correct me if I have a misunderstanding. I get the impression from what you were shown that a lot of people will go to these meetings and they'll listen to what is told them, and they're going to say, they're out of their mind. I'm not going to leave. I've got a job. Everything's fine. There's no chaos.
Yeah, there will be that. And then there'll be those stalwart individuals who, whether they have a knowledge of it, they do know how to trust their God or trust their leaders. And they have learned to discern truth. And some will go out of mere obedience. It's going to take and require great faith. But for those that don't necessarily have the faith, maybe they're able to act out of obedience. But there will come a time when, in order to maybe not get to the camps, but even to stay in the camps and survive the camps and endure the camps, we will have to rely on our faith. Because the destructions it's not like they happen beforehand, the really big ones, and it's not like they happen the day after we get to camp. We're going to be there a little while, and we may get news. Some I don't know how it happens, but there are some that learn, they get word that, for instance, nothing's happened in the valley. There's no big earthquake. There's no foreign troops. There's nothing. What am I doing here? I've got a perfectly nice, nice car, nice home, got a hot shower. Gosh, I could sure use a bath. Sitting 2 hours away. Why am I camping in a tent in the middle of nowhere? This is crazy. This is ridiculous. And sadly, they leave.
Right at the wrong time.
Well, once you're there, there's never a right time to leave. But when they leave, they will not be able to come back. And I can't go into detail on that other than to say that I did see so many different scenarios. Can't even discuss all of them, but one clear one that I saw was that people were there like a couple of weeks and heard, oh, there's nothing going on in the valley. I'm out of here. And they pack up their family and they leave. And then shortly after, whammo. And I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. That comes to one of the final questions that we've got. Were there some things that you saw that are significant that happened just before we're told to leave? Any symptoms or signs that's about to happen?
They've been happening. They're still happening, and they will continue to happen. I can't get into specifics other than say that we've all been given gifts and talents, and we've all, the Lord encourages all of His children, no matter what our status in life, no matter what our upbringing or He has given the light of Christ to every single one of us.
That really brings us to the key factor. You have seen the Savior. You were shown that very sacred experience. What's it going to be like for those who are ready to have that experience?
First thing that came to my mind is, are we ever ready? I hope and pray every day that I'm ready. I have a lot to work on.
As we all do.
But we have a very loving, tender, merciful God. And He gives us the trials and tests that He does to help us learn and grow and help us prepare. And it's all going to be just great.
Not fun times, but as you say, glorious times.
Glorious times.
Julie, thank you for sharing this experience and helping us get a little better understanding of what lies ahead. I am looking forward to your next book, and of course, we will drag you kicking and screaming back again to share that book.
I'm not sure where I'll be. Got some things, some transitions going on in my life as well, but in for an exciting couple of months, that's for sure.
Well, definitely please keep me in the loop, because as soon as that's ready, I want to get you back on.
Sounds good.
And the book, of course, is called A Greater Tomorrow, My Journey Through the Veil, Julie Rowe. Can you share the title of the next book?
I'm not 100% sure. Well, I am. I just ran it by Chad Dayball, my publisher. By the way, I need to put a plug in for Chad. Chad Dayball is an incredible author. He has had some very wonderful experiences himself, and I didn't learn this until after I sent him my manuscript. But you need to read his books. The time is now.
The time is now.
The time is now.
And a perfect note on which to end, because, friends, everything that you've learned today indicates that the time is now. Don't put off your preparation.